This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.
And which is, of course, also something that we miss doing over here, because it's a very different exposure that, if you're sitting in a bus and the view that you get, like the cityscape that you get is very different, and it makes you more part of it. And of course, that has changed for me over the years. Even in Beijing, till a certain point, I was very spoiled. And then after I got married in 2014 and my wife joined me there, she said that, what are you doing? You're spending 45 minutes taking a cab to your workplace, whereas you could just take a subway or a bicycle. And I was like, actually, you're right. I'd save half the time and have more fun doing it. So that's kind of one of the turning points where we really were like, okay, let's make this our lifestyle. And we started taking cycles everywhere, with the bicycles, even have to go across town 20, 30 kilometers one direction. We just go on a bicycle, unless if the weather was really bad and it was raining. I mean, even in minus 15-degree snowy weather, we would be out on our cycles. So I think that's part of you engage with people around you, with other bicyclists and motorcyclists and scooters, and and I'd point out to the sun and I'd say that, look how polluted it is. You can't even make out the sun. It's so hazy. The sky would usually be gray, sometimes be yellowish, at noon. So, and I'd always get the response that this is fog and there's no pollution, and it's a beautiful winter day. And I knew a little bit differently because I was, on social media and Twitter, which was banned in China. But I could see the tweets from the US embassy over there that had put up an air quality monitor, and every hour they would tweet out the air quality. And I knew it was very, very polluted. And of course, a lot of the international media was talking about it, but in China, the common person had no idea. Of course, there must have been a part of society which was interested, and maybe environmentalists, but it was just a non-issue over there. And that also led me to think about the parallels in Lahore, where my dadi lived there. So we would visit Lahore every year, my whole life, at least once a year we were there. And I don't remember from my childhood, say in the 1990s even, where people would say, you can't go to Lahore, there's too much fog, the planes can't land, and you can't go anywhere, you'll be stuck in the house, don't go there in the winter. And I was like, that's so odd, because it's similar to in Beijing that they're saying there's so much fog now, and it didn't used to be the case there also, and it turned out it was mostly pollution. And I was like, that the only way to find out is by measuring the air quality. And I think I spent a good year, mostly in my head and a little bit of research, trying to figure out how to have a low-cost air quality monitor and, try to figure out the numbers. Why low cost? Because the expensive ones are $20,000, $40,000. And I was like, I can't afford that. And so I was trying to figure out how to build a sensor and the hardware, and one part of it is not so complicated in terms of the hardware, but then the data quality, the data validation, and the data accessibility in terms of you don't want it just on a dumb device. It needs to be accessible remotely, because also since I was not even living there. And after spending a lot of time trying to figure it out, one day suddenly in the supermarket there was a consumer air quality monitor. Those things didn't exist before. This was in 2015. And I just bought the monitor, and it turned out it was just before I was traveling to Pakistan. So I bought two, one I kept in Beijing, and I brought one with me. No, I brought two with me. I brought one here, and I took it around in Karachi. And then I was also going to Lahore, and I took it around there. And then, I just saw on the device itself, I saw the numbers, I saw what it looks like. I believe this was February 2015. And February that time, or those few minutes that I looked at the numbers, the air wasn't so bad. And, I just like put it away and actually put it in my dad's study where he smokes a lot. So we always see the numbers are spiking up and down, and that monitor is still there. And, we still see the numbers go up every time he lights up a cigarette. So, and then, my holiday was over. I went back to China, and I started thinking, I was like, it's not enough to just have this instantaneous snapshot of the data, because that's just coincidental about when and what I saw at that particular moment. But you need to be able to see over the year, over the season, over the course of even a day, what the trends are. And then again, I started like revisiting the idea of like, what needs to be done. And this device wasn't that smart. It was just, the data was just there on the device itself. I couldn't access it remotely, so I couldn't really get much out of it. And I did, again, a lot of research in figuring out like how to create one. And then in 2016, so a year later, in October, I was again coming to Pakistan on holiday. So February is the National Week holiday. So you have like a week off in Beijing. And then October is a Golden Week. So you have another week off. So that's why the timing was like that. So in October and coming back, and I think it was on a Friday night, and we were traveling Saturday night. Friday night, I saw a press release about a company who just announced a local startup from Beijing, started by a French person called Jan, who started Air Visual, and I believe he has 7 children. And he was living in Beijing, and he was very concerned about not knowing what's in the air, so he decided to quit his job and do a startup around building an air quality monitor. And that kind of ticked all the boxes I had in mind. That it monitored air quality, it saved it, like you had the historical record. They had a website where anyone could access the data and download the data, and there was an app, and they literally just came out with like everything in one go in this one press release. And I called them up, and it was late in the evening, and I said, listen, I'm very interested. Can I come to your office? It was just in the neighborhood. So I cycled across the next day in the morning, and I got, how many monitors did I get? I think I got 6 monitors immediately, and I brought them to Pakistan. And that's how the air quality initiative, to have these monitors, I need them to be deployed at locations where people would care about not just the physical well-being of the monitors, but also of, they cost about $300. So to put a scale of the expensive 20, 40,000 ones and these ones. So these are called low-cost monitors. So it was very important to find a community who would be interested in the data. And I was very disconnected from people in Pakistan, like, the environmental community, the climate community, all of which are maturing now, but, you couldn't find these people back then. So I was like, okay, one I'll deploy at my parents' house, because that's kind of like my monitor and the one I'll look at. But I was like, even in Lahore, I was like, I don't want to put it in my grandmother's house. I need somebody who would care about this. And I don't know how, through friends of friends, I started talking about it. I had been talking about it already, but I was like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do, to build a community around this data that we'll be collecting. And I came across Rafi Alam, the environmental lawyer, and he was our first host. And then through another friend, I found one other person in Lahore who's also very vocal, but not as publicly as Rafi Alam. And similarly, we found a host in Islamabad and Peshawar. And that was the initial community, because, again, not just about installing a device at your home. I mean, it's very easy to install. It's like plugging your phone into a charger. Like, you don't have to really do anything to maintain it. Like, I was like, my only concern is if, like, because they're installed outside, if a cat pulls out the power cable, which has happened, or, like, just make sure that it's running. But more important was looking at the data, understanding what's happening, and of course, talking to people about it. Also in 2017, sometime, I think by March or so, I woke up one day and I was like, I'm just about to hit 10 years working with this one company. And is this really what I want to do with my life? You know, I don't want to go back to the West because that's a very different environment. I believe the opportunities are much more in the developing world, again, in terms of being able to give back to society and to contribute towards society in a more meaningful way than just profiteering for your own good. You know, of course, one needs to earn a living and have an income, but being able to help others in whatsoever ways. Talking to people and reaching out and like, you know, connecting with, and I'm not the sort of person who like, you know, uses my network, but I was like, this cause is very important. So let me get in touch with every journalist I can talk to, and not just local media, all the international journalists. I spoke with everyone, and I had one uniform response from everyone, that it's not news until it's breaking news. And I was like, you know, we're actually living in not just an environmental emergency, but like a health emergency, like an ecocide, like we don't know what's happening. And here we have the data, the numbers to prove what's happening, and no one was interested. Like, you know, they said like, one journalist was like, you know, fine, like you're showing me the numbers, but look at Beijing, look at Delhi, by that point was also coming in the limelight. And they were like, you have to be worse than that for us to report this story. Lahore is very, very polluted. I mean, we didn't know for certain how to rank it because it takes a while to trust the data that you're looking at. But one day the number hit 1,017 micrograms, which in AQI terms is like also over like 1,000, maybe 2,000 AQI. I mean, it was like off the charts. And one very kind reporter decided that, okay, now it's a story worth reporting. I don't recall her name right now, but she was writing for the New York Times. So it was New York Times that broke the story, and what an amazing institution it is, right? Because it broke in many stories. And once it broke the story, like, you know, obviously everyone else wanted to report about it. And then it became kind of like a sensation. And I was like, you know, I don't understand local media. I want to stay away from it. And I was like, I'm fine, like if it's coming in the print, but a lot of the television media was interested. And I don't watch local news or talk shows as such. I tend to read stuff more. So one of them got in touch, and I had the impression that, you know, it's just like talking heads and politicians shouting at each other and getting angry and, you know, aggravating each other. Like that's what I thought of media. And they got in touch, and I said, no, listen, I can't do this. And they were, I guess, very forward thinking, because they said, listen, if you change your mind, just call us back. And I spoke to a few friends, and you know, they were like, you know, whatever, it's up to you. But my wife is like, if it is really something you think is important enough, then being on the media is part of that. In November 2017, a smattering of reports started. By next year, by the next winter, the number of news stories about it increased. And by now, I think, especially in the winter, there's not a single day that there's not a story about air pollution in most of the newspapers. And this was also around November 2017. And, you know, so we had been collecting data since October 2016. So they took, I believe, a printout of the data, like just the raw numbers, and they presented it to the Lahore High Court. And that also was where the story totally transformed, where they're like, okay, air pollution is a problem, and the judge said you have to, you know, the environmental authorities are supposed to report air quality data, and it should be reported in real time, and it should be available publicly. And they also formed a smog commission. So like a lot of things suddenly happened in that same month around air quality, but all of it was driven by data and numbers, and, you know, having some validable proof that what we're imagining or thinking that it is not, again, not fog, but it's smog. It varies from city to city, but generally in the winter months in most of the polluted cities, the pollution level goes up, and the summer months are kind of okay. And you don't realize the transition because it is so gradual. But when you go away from that place and you come back, then you see it. And even here, if you go from Karachi to Lahore, you would feel it. I was telling you about this whole thing of in my head, I was like, we need to create an air quality sensor. And I was thinking about electronics and hardware and software and web platforms. But I also realized that probably my curiosity is better spent in deploying the monitors and getting the data. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that there's a term for it. It's called citizen science. And citizen science is something that anyone can do. And it's different when you just do it for your own, say, interest. But it becomes different when you really do it on a scientific way. Like in this case, you're producing primary data. We haven't yet published the data, but that's kind of the next step that we are looking towards going. I mean, the data has been shown at a lot of scientific conferences on air pollution, but we haven't published yet. But that's something is my target for the next couple of months to do. So science can lead you to a lot of places, and same goes for the Lahore High Court, the court case over there. Without numbers, you can't do anything. So two angles to it. The first is about change or curiosity. I feel that the power of ideas and the power of an individual is tremendous. So especially we living here in the global south, where we're always say looking up. Partially, it's of course the colonial mindset that we and I also am very much part of. That we think like whatever's coming from the West is the best, and that's the way it should be. And like going back to spending my time in the West, I was like, I don't mind traveling there, but do I want to live there? Not really. I think the way those societies have developed, I mean, they're amazing places in their own rights. But I think if you can be part of a society where you can be part of shaping that society in some way or form, that is a much more interesting thing to be doing. And again, you can be part of it by being fully, and I mean the natural environment and also the built environment. Because air pollution is one of those things that to solve it, you have to solve everything else. It's not, let's say it's not like, if you see in parts of Karachi where there's no sewage system and the sewage is just flowing around freely, like, just going through the ground, like say at Ibrahim Hedri, for example. That's an easy fix. You can just, put in a sewage system. But to fix air pollution, you need to fix the sewage system, you need to fix industrial emissions, you need to improve fuel quality, you need to improve urban waste management, you need to improve public transportation. Like it's one of those issues that is a measurement of everything else that you're doing. So like blue skies is essentially a sign of good governance. So if you have blue skies, it means like everything else is also okay. And you can go to very pristine places nowadays. Like I was in Skardu in the summer, and it's very dusty. And I installed an air pollution monitor there, and I was like, wow, the pollution levels are pretty high. I speculate probably because of construction dust. But there is a way to mitigate construction dust to a very large extent. I mean, like, I had to wear a mask in Skardu, of all places, because it's just so dusty over there. And so like, coming back to the change, I think, if we are to fix air pollution, like, there will be every kind of actor involved in our society, like, you know, from the, not just the environmental department, it is transportation, it's the oil ministry, it's the way our cities are built, the way they're developed. And I was speaking with you earlier about Boulder, Colorado being an example of a progressive city, but it's again just an urban wasteland. And so I'm very interested in our built environment, like in cities. Like, I like being in a city. I like that there are tens of millions of people around me, and the opportunities that it puts together, and the connections and the networks that it enables. And of course, I do like being out in nature in the countryside, but I think for me, like, the place to live is in the center of a big city, and not even in a suburb. Like, you know, you have to be part of your environment. And then how you get around, like, are you driving a car everywhere because maybe the distances are too big for, or the public transportation infrastructure doesn't exist, or the environment doesn't allow you, because till what half a year ago in Karachi, if you were to take a bus, you would not be very happy. And of course, now we have the new red buses, which are very nice and very comfortable. And those little things make all the difference. Like, even coming back to Beijing, I believe the subway network in my 5 years there went from 100 kilometers to 400 something kilometers. Like, it felt like every day a new subway station is coming up. Like, part of public transportation is also the last mile problem, where the network needs to be so broad that you should be able to walk just a few minutes to get to your destination. And in Europe, of course, that is the case. And having lived in a number of places in Europe, it's like, you know, I mean, you don't even think about, like, how to get around. Like, public transportation is the easiest and the most convenient and the most comfortable and the quickest way. And until that happens in the rest of our cities, like, you know, we're heading towards an ecocide of sorts, and there's only so much technological solutions, like, you know, like, you can have a better sewage treatment system, you can have more EVs, but there's only so much that these things can solve. Coming back to our built environment, right? Like, all these solutions, we're kind of importing them. Like, it doesn't make any sense to have separate bus lanes just because they were done in Bogota, and now it's become a trend to happen everywhere, when you don't have a bus running every 2 minutes, where you say, okay, it's literally like running a train. So you don't necessarily need to just import tech ideas from abroad. We can have local ideas, and I think those are out there. But those conversations, those dialogues, those exchanges between the people in power and the people who might have those ideas don't really happen. Like Arif Hassan, for example, one of the most renowned urban planners, you know, he's advised governments worldwide, except our own government, where not much is happening. So I think these, and I'm sure there are countless others like him, who are out there, and they don't have to be people of that generation. Like, I think we also have to look at the younger generations who are full of new ideas and fresh ideas, which can be taken forward. So coming again to my air quality story, right? Like, I've done all this work and done all this media engagement, but, you know, we haven't yet really published anything in a scientific, peer-reviewed journal. So that's one of the things we lack, is that we talk a lot, but, you know, like, to put your thoughts down on paper and to be able to communicate them. That's a big part of building up local knowledge. When we were trying to, say, build the awareness around air pollution, and we weren't making that much headway in the first couple of years. And this one idea came about, that why don't we have a protest? And you know, so I was living in Karachi, and everything was Lahore focused. So we were on this Zoom call with a whole bunch of people, a lot of concerned citizens, mothers especially, and they were like, we need to, like, get the message out there, because this was 2019 and nobody's listening. And I was like, air pollution is too narrow a lens for you to get people to be interested in. Why don't we make this about climate change? And that's where you get a lot more interested parties. And one brief segue, like there doesn't exist much data or published knowledge about air pollution, the same goes for climate change. You might find information about the melting glaciers because we have all three major mountain ranges geographically located in Pakistan, but we don't really know about all the other environmental and climate disasters that are coming to us. There's not any local knowledge. There's not scientists, academics, even activists who really working on producing that knowledge. Yes, there is activism around let's do something, but that something is based on very global knowledge sources. Like, yes, we know sea levels are going to rise, but let's do a local study around it. And let's make it more nuanced. Like, how will it affect various ethnicities, the Indus Delta, exactly what's going to happen. And the reason why these studies need to be local, like, for example, early last year, there was one study published about air pollution in the Indian subcontinent. And when you read it, like, Pakistan, even though it's a big part of the subcontinent, is just like a side note in that. So you're really lacking that local effort. And so with that conversation about making it a protest about climate change, I was like, why don't we make this a nationwide thing? Why just Lahore? And so we organized it and we formed Climate Action Pakistan. So I was one of the founders of it, but it's a very informal network. So I think all 15, 20 key people call themselves the founders of this movement. And we were really like the way climate activism is done up till now and climate justice movements, it doesn't work. Like, every time there is something, suddenly you have all the international NGOs, like the usual names that are out there wanting to come and sponsor, and you have the banners and you have their things, and like, multinationals want to sponsor. Like, this has to be a grassroots effort. No corporate sponsorship, no non-profit sponsorship even. Like, it has to be really individuals. And we managed to then in September, so this idea came about like in early June 2019, and by September when we organized the climate strike, I mean, it was a lot of work and a lot of coordination to be nationwide. I mean, we were in the northern areas, we were in Balochistan, we were in Thatta and Badin, and like, I mean, of course the scale of the strike was different in different cities, but like the Karachi, Lahore had like about 3,000-ish people turning out in both cities, and in Islamabad you had the Minister for Climate Change trying to take over this movement.
This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.